One of the things that I like about war chapters in the Book of Mormon is that it more fully highlights, by contrast, good versus evil. When prophets turn to God, when people pray, when leaders are guided by the Spirit and led in principles of mercy and freedom. It contrasts harshly and brightly against those that would take life just for pleasure of it, or drive people into slavery, or simply just try to destroy people's freedom. This contrast shows up in our world today all the time, as there really are the two forces of light versus dark. Look around for 2 seconds and you see it everywhere. Life really is full of these kinds of battles. Now today in chapter 53 of the Book of Mormon, we are introduced to a story that is one of the most famous in the entire book. We meet the army of Helaman. And if you are like me, you will come to love the army of Helaman and what they represent and what we can learn from them. So let's go ahead and get started. Feel free to follow along on your own digital copy or paper copy, or just listen, and let's get going, see what we can learn today. It came to pass that they did set guards over the prisoners of the Lamanites, and did compel them to go forth and bury their dead, yea, and also the dead of the Nephites who were slain. And Moroni placed men over them to guard them while they should perform their labors. And this is referring to the end of the last chapter, where many people on both sides, Nephite and Lamanite, died in a big confrontation, and the Nephites took a huge amount of prisoners. So we're going to see what they did to manage this big population of prisoners in just a moment. It came to pass that the Lamanites had finished burying their dead, and also the dead of the Nephites. They were marched back forth into the land of Bountiful, and Teancum, by the orders of Moroni, Teancum being one of his main sub-commanders, caused that they should commence laboring in digging a ditch round about the land, or the city of Bountiful. He caused that they should build a breastwork of timbers upon the inner bank of the ditch, and they should cast up dirt out of the ditch against the breastwork of timbers, until they had encircled the city of Bountiful round about with a strong wall of timbers and earth to an exceeding height. So this is just describing what Teancum is having the prisoners do. He's having them spend time doing some public works projects to make good use of their physical strength. While they're there being prisoners, might as well take advantage of this manpower. This city became an exceeding stronghold ever after. And in this city they did guard the prisoners of the Lamanites, even within the wall that they had caused them to build with their own hands. So they didn't have a prison already ready-made for this huge amount of prisoners. They had the prisoners come build the prison and then had them inhabit, I guess, within those walls. Now Moroni was compelled to cause the Lamanites to labor, because it was easy to guard them while at their labor, and he desired all of his force when he should make an attack upon the Lamanites. And I've always thought this verse was interesting, that it's just so practical. It's pointing out such a practical truth, that if you have a huge amount of men, war feelings and hormones surging, having them just sit around all day, they're going to find a way to escape and to harass the guards. But you put them to work, and that's win-win, at least for the Nephites' point of view, because the individuals they're guarding will be a lot more easy to keep control of, and they're also going to get some projects done at the same time. That is just good practical advice. It's funny, it makes me think about, not advice because we're all going to have to deal with this, but just like in a practical sense, you have to admit that is a handy way to deal with the situation. But it makes me laugh because I remember years ago when my older sister had a bunch of little kids, she felt like this verse had good parenting advice. She said that she read this one day in the Book of Mormon, that it was easier to guard your prisoners when they're busy laboring. And she said, you know what, this is actually true in parenting, because if you get your kids doing chores, they don't get so rebellious. They don't get so difficult cooking up, schemes to be difficult. They're engaged in doing their chores, and it uses up some of their energy. I just thought it was funny because at the ages she had, I think her kids were like 4 through 12 or something. And she's like, if I just try to entertain them all day, they go crazy. But if I give them some chores, it is a good outlet for them, and they're more tame. So there's good lessons in every verse of the Book of Mormon, even if you use it for an unlikely, not obvious application. Okay, verse 5. This city became an exceeding stronghold ever after. Oh, we already read that this city, that the Lamanites were creating these walls, that now this ended up being a good stronghold. And I think it was the city of Bountiful that we're reading about. It came to pass that Moroni had thus gained a victory over one of the greatest of the armies of the Lamanites, and had obtained possession of the city of Mulek, which was one of the strongest holds of the Lamanites in the land of Nephi. And thus he had also built a stronghold to retain his prisoners. And it came to pass, he did no more attempt to battle with the Lamanites in that year, but he did employ his men in preparing for war, yea, and in making fortifications to guard against the Lamanites, yea, and also delivering their women and children from famine and affliction, and providing food for their armies. He's being incredibly proactive. He's preparing the armies for battle. He's preparing the cities to be strongholds. He's protecting them against famine by putting up stores of food. So he's being very forward thinking. And that is, if you look at the themes of battle and war in the Book of Mormon, you have roughly two groups of people: those who are simply trying to provide and protect for their people, generally the Nephites, although it varies, and then those who want to be leeches and steal resources, try to get slaves or have power over, and that is the other driving force. And we see those forces at play in the world today. So then, even if all our desire is just to be free and just to take care of our own, we still have to be wise to protect and prepare against those who would take that away, because it is incredibly naive to think that everyone in the world wants freedom for us or wants that we can just be peaceful and happy. There's always going to be people, until Christ reigns and the world is perfected, there's always going to be people that have nefarious aims and want to take you down and steal your resources. So you can't be naive. You want to take care of your family and be peaceful, but you still can't be naive. You need to be prepared. So that's what Moroni is doing, is preparing. It came to pass that the armies of the Lamanites on the west sea, while in the absence of Moroni on account of some intrigue amongst the Nephites, which caused dissensions among them, had gained some ground over the Nephites, yea, insomuch they had obtained possession of a number of the cities in that part of the land. Now this is unfortunate, because evil never rests. There's always people, too bad, there's always people that are willing to fall into temptation or complacency or contention. And that is what happened with some of these Nephites. They became embroiled in some dissensions among each other, lost their power, and some Lamanites were able to gain ground and obtain possession of a number of the cities. So that is why the principle of unity and non-contention is incredibly helpful. It's not because no one has a brain and no one has an opinion. It's because when you let dissension and contention become your focus, you no longer have the strength of the community, which is exactly what happened here. They lost their strength, and the Lamanites were able to take possession of a number of cities, which is incredibly unfortunate, because how hard do you have to fight to regain that ground once you lose it? It's a lot harder to regain it. Thus, because of iniquity amongst themselves, yea, because of dissension and intrigue among themselves, they were placed in the most dangerous circumstances. Now behold, I have somewhat to say concerning the people of Ammon, who in the beginning were Lamanites, but by Ammon and his brethren, or rather by the word and power of God, they had been converted unto the Lord, and had been brought down into the land of Zarahemla, and had ever since been protected by the Nephites. Okay, so we're having kind of a little break in the middle of the chapter to switch to a different narrative. The narrator here is switching to talk about the people of Ammon, who missionaries had gone and converted them, or again, they had been converted through the power of the Holy Spirit and through Christ, and they came to live with the Nephites in the land of Zarahemla to be protected from their new enemies, the Lamanites, who hated them because they'd been converted, and they had taken an oath of non-violence. So, verse 11, because of their oath, they had been kept from taking up arms against their brethren, because these converts, this group of former Lamanites that now were converted to the Lord, they had done so much violence in their life that they said, we, as an offering to God, as a show of a covenant with him, we will never kill another soul. And so they would not engage in warfare. And so they weren't able to help the Nephites, who were their new best friends and protectors. So because of this oath, they had not taken up arms. For they had taken an oath that they never would shed blood more. And according to their oath, they would have perished. And they really would have. There's a scene chapters ago where they're laying down and being hewn down by Lamanites because they refuse to fight. And this was a very personal spiritual journey for them and very important for them to honor this. And the Nephites respected them for this oath that they took. Yea, they would have suffered themselves to have fallen into the hands of their brethren, had it not been for the pity and exceeding love which Ammon and his brother had had for them. So these other Nephites really saw the predicament of these converts and were willing to help them and protect them and did not expect them to give up their oath of nonviolence. And for this cause, they were brought down into the land of Zarahemla, that they ever had been protected by the Nephites. And if you remember from previous chapters, they paid a appropriate tax of food and resources to the Nephites to fund Nephite armies to protect them, so that they wouldn't be an undue burden. But it came to pass that when they saw the danger and many afflictions and tribulations which the Nephites bore for them, they were moved with compassion and were desirous to take up arms in defense of their country. They're really feeling bad at this point. It's been years since they had made their oath, and they're seeing the dire straits that their brethren are in, and they're thinking, oh, maybe we should help. But behold, as they were about to take their weapons of war, they were overpowered by the persuasions of Helaman and his brethren, for they were about to break the oath which they had made. And Helaman feared, lest by so doing they should lose their souls. Therefore all those who had entered into this covenant were compelled to behold their brethren wade through their afflictions in these dangerous circumstances at this time. I really appreciate what Helaman did, that he emphasized to these good souls that you shouldn't go back on your oath to God. And I just love how it illustrates that, although there are communal aspects of relationship with God in the Latter-day Saint worldview, like worshiping at church, worshiping at the temple, participating in baptisms and temple covenants and missionary work, these are very communal type behaviors, as in we would hope all that come into Christ would participate in these. There's also a very individual path as well that is respected. That is, you've got to work out your own relationship with God in what makes sense to you in your context and with your own vulnerabilities, with your own past and your own everything. And that's what's going on with these people, these converts who had taken that very personal, very personally moved upon covenant with God, that they would never take another life. This was an individual choice for them. It was not something that God said everyone should do. This was something that they showed up to the altar of Christ, essentially, and said, I will give this up. This is something I never can return to. And that it was an understanding that they had with God. And so again, we all have like communal aspects of worship. For instance, again, baptism. All of us, we'd want to be baptized to show that covenant to God, to take that covenant with God and Christ. But that there's individual things that we might do as well as we individually work out that salvation with our own awareness of our weaknesses. So I just love that is so respected. Verse 16, behold, it came to pass that these same converts that would not fight, they had many sons. And these sons had not entered into a covenant to not take weapons of war to defend themselves against their enemies. They had never killed people. They had never had to, make that covenant. So they're in a different place. So these sons assembled themselves together to take up arms, and they called themselves Nephites. So they're saying, hey, we didn't covenant not to help. We can help. We're not breaking any agreement with God. They entered into a covenant to fight for the liberty of the Nephites, yea, to protect the land unto the laying down of their lives. Yea, even they covenanted that they would never give up their liberty, but they would fight in all cases to protect the Nephites and themselves from bondage. So these are men of great integrity. They have grown up with parents of great integrity. These parents were willing to sacrifice all, even their lives, if necessary, to the cause of Christ. And these kids have grown up seeing that. And it was very heartfelt, very primal for their parents. This is not third, fourth, fifth generation parents that are just living off the rules of their own parents. These are parents who had massively vivid conversion experiences and gave their heart to Christ and were literally willing to die for that belief. And these kids have grown up seeing that level of intentionality and worship from their parents. Now behold, verse 18, there were 2,000 of these young men who entered into this covenant and took their weapons of war to defend their country. Now behold, as they never had hitherto been a disadvantage to the Nephites, they became now at this period of time a great support, that they took their weapons of war and that they would that Helaman should be their leader. So Helaman, for whatever reason, whatever relationship he has with them, they have asked him to be their leader, and they're willing to fight. So we're going to start seeing the trajectory of their story and what happens to them. Do they fight well? I mean, they're obviously inexperienced. Do they get massacred? Do they actually end up helping? We're going to find out as we continue going. Now, before I continue with just the last few verses, I will just turn your attention to, I have a link in the description of this video for a newsletter that you could sign up for. And I'm not even sending anything out right now, but if you'd like to stay in touch with future projects that I'm doing, I will at some point send some things out in a newsletter. And so I would love to have you hop aboard if you want to stay connected with the projects that I'm involved in. Okay, verse 20, the last few verses here. They were all young men. They were exceedingly valiant for courage and also for strength and activity. For behold, this was not all. They were men who were true at all times in whatsoever thing they were entrusted. Yea, they were men of truth, they were men of soberness, they had been taught to keep the commandments of God and to walk uprightly before them. So these armies of Helaman had qualities of character that brought God's power. They had integrity, truth, soberness, obedience. If we want the safety and the strength of faith that they had, we need to exercise those same Christ-like attributes that they exercise, because as you will see in the future, they actually were a great and strong army. So that's a spoiler alert, I'm sorry, but they actually end up being an incredibly powerful army. And Christ likewise will help us be powerful in our lives as we reach for him with these same attributes that they have: soberness and truth, walking uprightly and keeping the commandments of God. And now it came to pass that Helaman did march at the head of these 2,000 stripling warriors. And I think the word stripling just means young man, to support the people in the borders of the land on the south by the West Sea. And thus ended the 28th year of the reign of the judges over the people of Nephi. So as we leave the people of Nephi, they're in the middle of a very, very devastating war. They've lost a lot of men. They're up against a formidable army that's temporarily not fighting them for 1 second, but they've also had some infighting and they've lost some ground because of that. They are having to guard all kinds of prisoners. That's exhausting and eating up resources, but they do have this new army of 2,000 young men that's going to prove a great resource. So we'll pick up this story in the next chapter, and I will see you in the next episode.